And then that happens.
You're saying they're all asleep at the wheel?
Yeah.
You can be collecting income every month and still be losing money. It's called NAV erosion, and most covered call ETF investors completely miss it.
And no one's paying attention.
If you're new to this channel, I wanted to welcome you. The focus of it is covered call ETFs. And today I'm going to talk about a very controversial topic, and that is NAV erosion. So what I'm going to do for you is define what NAV erosion is very simply, advise you how to find NAV erosion yourself, give example on 2 covered call ETFs and their NAV erosion, and then stay until the very end because I'm going to talk to you about a couple of scenarios where NAV erosion is actually a tool and another where NAV erosion is something you really have to watch out for because it's going to be impacting your money. And of course, I do want to put out a disclaimer that nothing in this video is meant as financial advice. And even though I'm going to talk about financial concepts in general terms, it's still prudent to advise you that this is for educational purposes only. So what is NAV erosion? NAV erosion in simple terms is when your investment pays you, but the actual value of it keeps dropping. You're getting paid on one hand and losing value with the other. To put it another way, let's say you buy a stock for $40, it gives you a $5 distribution rate. But then at the end of the year or at the end of whatever time period, the stock went down to $30. Yep, you got the $5, so your total return was $35, but you got a NAV erosion of $10. And in this case, it would be 25%. 10 divided by 40 is 25%. So let's talk about where can you go to find the NAV erosion. Well, you can go to a site like Yahoo Finance and type in the ETF, and you can pull up the chart. You don't even need to do formulas. You can just look at where the price started and see where it is now. If the price keeps trending down over time, that's NAV erosion. So again, if it started, let's say at $40 and now it's at 30, that's a 25% drop in value. So even if it's paying you income, that drop is still happening in the background. So the simplest way to spot NAV erosion is just look at the price and see if it's going down over time. I do want to mention something as well, that some people calculate NAV erosion by adding dividends back in, but that's actually total return, not NAV erosion. Those are two completely different measurements. So NAV erosion and total return are not the same thing. If you were to add dividends back in, you're not measuring price decay or NAV erosion anymore. You're actually measuring total return. And total return will almost always look fine, which is exactly why you need to separate them. So here's the moment of truth. I'm going to go into 2 very specific examples. I'm going to take 2 covered call ETFs and talk about the NAV erosion. The first one I'm going to talk about is one you all pretty much know by now if you're into covered call ETFs, and that's JEPI. And the other one is going to be RDTY. Let's go into it. So looking at JEPI, I did some back testing all the way from when they were started back in 2020. And looking at the compounded annual growth rate, you can see that it's 1.76%. So this means the NAV erosion is basically negligible, is flat. One could argue, because of inflation, this and that, perhaps it was negative, even though it went up by 1.76%. But for all intents and purposes, there was no NAV erosion. And this is one extreme example of where they kept the investment somewhat flat. Now I'm going to go into RDTY, which is one of YieldMax's 0-day to expiration funds. By the way, in a previous video, I did a deep dive on it and other 0-day to expiration funds. Make sure to check it out. Here is the link. And let's go into the backtest. So this is a younger fund compared to JEPI. It only got started in March 2025. So I did the backtest starting then. And if you look at the compounded annual growth rate, it's pretty scary. They basically lost close to 1/4 of the principal. And that is an example of pretty hefty NAV erosion that you're looking at for RDTY. And that's the point I want to make about NAV erosion. So as an example, looking at RDTY, the distribution rate is 46%. And at first glance, that looks really appealing to a lot of investors. But then you look at the NAV erosion and losing almost 25% of the principal in a year, it doesn't look so appealing anymore. So please make sure to take a look at both distribution and NAV erosion as you assess a prospective covered call ETF. By the way, I plan on creating a scorecard to help you assess different covered call ETFs, which is going to be updated monthly. If that is of interest to you, to help you decide which covered call ETF makes the most sense for your financial picture, please hit the like and subscribe button so you can be among the first to be notified when that happens. Let me share with you a couple of scenarios to better illustrate NAV erosion when it's a tool versus something to be wary of. And please take in mind, these are simply my opinions. I'm not saying you should go one route or another based on what I'm describing, but hopefully this will help you assess which direction you might want to go into. So let's say you have a guy, his name is Robert, 65 years old, has maybe $500,000 saved, needs about $3,500 a month to cover living expenses. His pension is giving him $2,000 a month, so he needs about $1,500 more per month. So if Robert was to put $250,000 into RDTY, which is right now yielding over 40% weekly distributions, that's going to generate that $1,500, maybe a little bit more per month in income. At this stage, does Robert care that his NAV is dropping? No, because he's spending the distributions, not reinvesting them. He doesn't need the principal to grow. He basically needs the income to outlast them. So a slowly declining NAV that funds his lifestyle is the whole strategy. NAV erosion here is literally the mechanism delivering his retirement income. It's working as designed. Now look at scenario number 2, where NAV erosion would be a trap. Let's say you have a 40-year-old, his name is Marcus, and he's got about $100,000 saved. He sees RDTY paying 40% plus per yield, thinks he's found passive income for life, reinvest some, spend some. But unfortunately for him, in 5 years, that $100,000 at the end of 5 years would be about $32,000, $33,000. That distribution is going to shrink every year because it's a percentage of a shrinking base. So Marcus thinks he's building wealth, but he's actually in a slow bleed. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 potentially could have doubled his money. So at 40, Marcus needed compounding growth, not income. NAV erosion is stealing his most valuable asset, time in the market. So NAV erosion is a tool when you need income more than growth, and a trap when you need growth more than income. The ETF doesn't know how old you are. The ETF doesn't know your income requirements. The ETF doesn't know what your long-term goals are. That's up to you to decide. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please hit the like and subscribe button. And I want to wish you a very prosperous rest of your week, and I will see you on the next episode.